What's up, everybody? We're back.
Yeah! Hey, welcome back to the Metalhead's Journey. Hey, if you're wondering what the hell that was, as we are, hey, we're tackling the top 20 hair metal album list of all time this week. Last week, hopefully you checked us out, we did the first selection of the top 20 rock list. That was Rush Moving Pictures. So we're moving on to hair metal this week. We have David Lee Roth's debut album, Eat 'Em and Smile. Dave, didn't you say this is like the album that got you into metal? Isn't that what you were telling me earlier?
No,
that was something else.
That was not this. That was not this.
All right. Well, hey, listen, we hopefully you guys have been following along with us. We did a top 50 metal albums of all time list a little while back, and so in an effort to kind of keep ourselves from burning out on the same stuff, we decided we're going to rotate through 4 different lists here. So we got the top rock list, we got the top hair metal list, top prog list, and we have a top new metal list. So we're going to be circulating different lists every week. So this week we're on the hair metal list, like we said. So this is David Lee Roth. This is Eat 'Em and Smile. We're going to do a quick intro to the band here, and then we're going to get into the album here. This is number 20 on the list. Yes, good call, Fossil. All right, David Lee Roth, born in 1954, is an American rock singer born in Indiana. Known for his wild and energetic stage persona, he was the lead vocalist of Van Halen for 3 different stints. He's also a successful solo artist, as we know. David Lee Roth left Van Halen in 1985 due to musical differences with the band and other opportunities. Namely, he was going to be given $20 million to make a movie. $20 million. As a solo artist, David Lee Roth has released 6 studio albums, including his most recent record, Diamond Dave, released in 2003. He sold over 4 million records as a solo artist, over 50 million records as the frontman for Van Halen, and as a member of the 2007 class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. With Van Halen, obviously. Yep. Not for his solo career.
Spoilers.
Eat 'Em and Smile, released in 1986, is David Lee Roth's debut solo album. The songs for this album were written originally for the soundtrack to the film David Lee Roth was working on called Crazy from the Heat. Yep. The movie was never made, but the songs were still released. Dave put together a supergroup for this record. He has Steve Vai on guitar, Billy Sheehan on bass, and Greg Bissonette on the drums. The album was very successful, selling over 2 million copies and peaking at number 4 in the Billboard charts. This album produced 4 singles: Yankee Rose, Going Crazy, That's Life, and I'm Easy.
Okay.
So going into this, like, what was everybody's kind of like? What's everybody's experience with Van Halen?
So I feel like we're all gonna kind of repeat ourselves here, but for me, my experience with Van Halen is probably the average person my age's experience with them. I've heard the hits.
Radio hits.
Yeah, I've heard the hits, and I think the hits are good, right?
Jonah, same thing?
Yeah, pretty much.
Like I've never deep dived into their catalog or like a full album experience from Van Halen.
Mine's a little bit different because the age difference between me and you guys is
because you're old
Van
as fuck.
Halen. Yeah, Van Halen, as well as this David Lee Roth album, were kind of in that era of where I was just sick and tired of hair metal bands. And I was the perfect candidate for what would become the Black Album. I was waiting for something different. So I had already kind of just stopped listening to this stuff. So my experience with them is basically, yes, the radio hits, we share all that in common, but mine was like, I was already done listening to this by the time that this album dropped. When we got this, I saw the cover of the album and I was like, yeah, I remember that, but that's all I remember.
Mm. Yeah, growing up in Houston, kind of the same thing as a Rush record, right? We had 101, we had 93.7. So there was a healthy rotation of Van Halen. I mean, you had a lot of Eruption into You Really Got Me. Ain't Talking About Love, obviously Panama Jump, Hot for Teacher, right? Lots of great songs. But I think we all share the same thing. None of us have really taken the plunge into like a full record experience with Van Halen. I don't know what you guys think, but like I never really felt like Van Halen was like a hair band per se. Like, did you guys ever get that that
No,
feeling. I felt like
and
more than anything else, just rock, like a good hard rock band.
and full disclosure,
I
they're
think
they're not on this list either. So the list I
I think
compiled.
part of the thing is the look. Part of the but they all had the teased hair, they all had the spandex, they all had the 18 different band color bandanas and stuff like that. I mean, the
Yeah.
tight pants and stuff like that. So there's more to it than just the sound when you talk about the
Yeah.
hairband.
I just thought it's interesting because we all were joking with Dave about this record, but we were like, are we sure this record should be on the list? Like, not because it's not good or whatever, but like my concern was more just genre specific. Like, I
Yeah.
don't feel like this is like a hair metal record. I
I
don't get
neither
that
do I.
feeling from it. David Lee Roth is the only thing about this record that feels hair metalish to me.
Yeah. I
There's a
agree.
couple of
I
songs
think
that I would say are pretty typical of like hair metal riffs and vibes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll probably easily get into those, but I mean, I said as soon as we started listening to this, I'm like, are we sure this is number 20 on this
Yeah.
list?
Yeah.
If you look, I don't know if any of you've done any independent research or whatever on it, but like this record
All the
on
time.
a lot of hair metal lists is fairly high. It's not like near the bottom. This is a
Yeah, me and Dave were running through them the other day, and it was like 25. It was like in some cases like 16.
Yeah. It's a pretty popular record. We'll get into specifics, but as far as expectations with this album, for me, we reacted to the single, and I expected that to be the style of the record. And I think as we'll find out from me at least, I think that may have been to my detriment.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Dave. Give us your general thoughts on the record.
So, my general thoughts on the record are this. I think this record is hard carried by the musicians in the band outside of David Lee Roth, which not a good way to start an album that is based on somebody's solo career, and I am immediately setting him to the side as an issue.
But Dave, I think you would say the same thing about Ozzy, though, right?
I mean,
I
you
remember
didn't have
you said that.
I
remember. I had
look,
receipts.
hey, look, you got receipts, and look, I'm gonna stand by whatever I said previously. I'll stand by that. I don't recall, but it sounds like something I could say. Yes. As far as this record, though, Billy Sheehan and Steve Vai, specifically Steve Vai, I think hard carry any enjoyment I got out of this record, which admittedly wasn't nearly as much as I had initially hoped. But we'll get into that. So overall, I would say I'm disappointed with this record, at least, coming out the gate.
Jonah, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can mirror a lot of those sentiments. For me, it sounded pretty standard fare. Like nothing was too crazy on this album from like a songwriting perspective. Obviously, we'll go into more detail about some of the particular songs and the parts of those songs. They do stand out, but it's got kind of a big party boy vibe. And actually, I didn't know that trivia about the fact that it was going to be for a movie, because in that
almost makes a little
context,
bit
it
more sense.
totally makes sense. Like the song order, the structure, and like how the songs are written. This sounds like a movie soundtrack, especially what song was it? I'm Easy. That sounds like a scene in a movie where there's just people dancing. So, it would get overall a not recommend for me if not for Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan. And, I'm going to hype up Billy Sheehan a little more. Like on some of these songs, he's going hard. Like he is basically shredding. There's a bass solo on one of these songs. So, yeah, I mean, they absolutely carry the album. Not that, the drummer is any slouch or anything, but, Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan are the stars of this album for me, for sure.
Yeah. Jason, what you got?
Utterly, in the end, I was let down. Mostly because I haven't listened to a full Van Halen or David Lee Roth album start to finish. As I described, like I was the poster child for I am sick and tired of hair metal, or hair bands, etc. Like I just give me something, anything different. And so I was looking forward to this because now I'm older. We've been on this journey. We've listened to a lot of bands I've never heard of. We've experienced quite a bit of stuff. Bands that came out way before this, and again, this is not heavy metal. This is hair bands. But there's a handful of these bands that I've already seen on this list that I know I'm gonna like. So I was really hoping for more, and was really disappointed. Now I will agree with Jonah when you realize that this was, I don't know how much all of it or some of it or a portion of it or chunks of these songs were meant for a movie, uh, but it does make it a little bit more sense now.
I agree.
Yeah. For me, man, I feel like this album just kind of has a fucking vibe to it. Jonah said it earlier. It's like a little bit of like a party boy thing. I agree, man. I think if you're sitting around drinking with your friends, I think this is a great soundtrack to have on in the background. Like, there's nothing in here that's gonna like derail your good time. If anything else, there's a lot of upbeat, a lot of high tempo stuff that's really kind of, I think it's gonna help build energy for your group, right? I would just like, I think I listen to this and I think to myself, I'd rather have the real Van Halen though, right? Like we talked about this a little bit with KK's Priest video. Dave, did you put that out?
Yes.
Okay, good. With the KK's Priest album, where KK Downing has made his own version of Judas Priest, and he's got Tim Ripper Owens. Well, it's like David Lee Roth was like, "Hey, I really like what's going on over here in Van Halen. Let me just go get like Eddie Van Halen Diet Jr. over here, Steve Vai, and let me put together a little group and let's just kind of replicate the same thing that's going on there."
And Steve Vai's catching strays for no reason.
Yeah, and I feel like he just took. I feel like he made a worse version of Van Halen. Personal. That's just kind of a personal feel on it, right? But I don't think the album is terrible by any means. I just think it certainly has some opportunities. So I think we've all referenced this a couple of times here, but I'll get into like who I thought my MVP of the record was. And it's obviously Steve Vai. I mean, look, I'm not trying to shit talk Steve Vai because Eddie Van Halen is this guy at the top. And it's okay if you're like in the next like 2, 3, or 4 or 5. Like that's still upper echelon playing, dude. Steve Vai's a monster. He is playing like an animal on this. There are so many standout moments, particularly on Girls' Night in Buffalo and Big Trouble. I think those are some highlight solos from Steve Vai on this one. So Steve Vai MVP by a landslide.
Yeah, I think Steve Vai is absolutely the MVP of this record. If I ever do revisit this record, it would only be to hear his work on the record. That would be the only reason. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Josh. I mean, there's nothing more I could say. Steve Vai is the reason this record is tolerable. If I'm being honest.
I mean, I'm not to be a broken record, but I agree. Although I will say that the bass in this album, pretty much start to finish, is extremely solid.
Rock solid.
Yeah, for sure.
The in my opinion, like for my taste, Big Trouble. I love the bass guitar in Big Trouble. The bad part about that is that that's like, for me, that's like the worst song on the album. But
Big Trouble's the worst song on the album?
For me, yes.
Wow. Okay.
Cool story. I really love the way that the bass is played throughout that song. But Steve Vai is definitely the MVP. If I'm curious, like how much worse our thoughts of this album would be if Steve Vai was just like, man, I would really like to do this, but I'm busy.
Well, part of me is like this album would have never gotten made if that was the case. But I didn't realize how popular David Lee Roth was at the time, right? Like not being a big Van Halen fan and definitely not being of the time. Dude, I mean, look, when I saw like his actual record sales with Van Halen is actually north of 56 million. And I'm like, dude, that's a fucking ton of records, man. Yeah. Like I guess I underestimated in my head. I guess I just don't appreciate how popular they were. And so I think like if Steve Vai's on this record, it probably doesn't get made. Then I think they could put nobody on this fucking record and they would still make the David Lee Roth record. This shit still sold 2 million records.
When he did the reunion tour with Van Halen, 2007.
In 2007.
They did 40 shows and made $90 million.
Yeah.
Fucking crazy.
Yep. Jonah, what about you? Tell me why Billy Sheehan's the MVP of this record.
Actually, I was gonna throw it to Billy Sheehan for my money. The stuff that he pulls off, like I said, there's a bass solo on Elephant Gun, on freaking Shy Boy, which is my favorite track on the album. Dude, there's so many there's so many licks and riffs that they play together, and it's gold. It's money for me. But I wanted to piggyback a little bit off what you said earlier about how David Lee Roth being popular, and I feel like hair metal is one of those genres that hasn't really aged super well. But I mean, if you think about it, think about going to a party when this album came out and somebody puts this album on, it's gonna be a good time.
Bro,
sure.
This album, I guarantee you, in 1986, at a fucking kegger, this album was slapping hard.
Yes, people were going.
Well, this is that's the same year that Master of Puppets came out, so it's like.
Yeah, but again, that's what I'm saying. Like, the type of people who are going to be listening to this album
For sure.
are going to be jamming this album. And the type of people who are listening to Master of Puppets, that's a whole different kind of party. So
they're sitting in their mother's basement smoking the reefer.
Yeah, they're not really partying. They're just
I'm not kidding that dudes would in my high school were going to school as a freshman, going to school dressed like David Lee Roth.
Going with the assless chaps to school? That's a bold move, Cotton.
We'll see if it works out.
Yeah.
Plus, you have to also think about it. Like I said, the whole party boy aesthetic. I feel like a guy like David Lee Roth. If you look at his kind of persona, there's really only one reason to make an album like this or to dress like that going to high school. It's that you're trying to get chicks.
Yeah. Look. I think we can all agree that for whatever shortcomings David Lee Roth might have, being a frontman is not one of them.
Correct.
Oh no,
dude!
Imagine seeing these guys live. Imagine seeing this album performed live. It would be
probably a blast.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw the music video for Yankee Rose, or we reacted to it. Yeah. It was basically just a recorded stage show, but
yeah. And he's going nuts on there. It was funny you talked about getting chicks. One of the side things that I read about David Lee Roth, he's never been married. He said he's come out as only having 4 loves in his life. He said, but whenever they were high on the run in Van Halen, he slept with every pretty girl with 2 legs.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't doubt it.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of them didn't have both legs.
Yeah, well, that's why my first thought was why is he excluding girls with only 1 leg? I'm sure they're fine too. Well, Jonah, you already gave away your number 1 top track, but why don't you run through your top tracks for us here and let us know what skippers you may have as well.
So Shy Boy was my top track. I just think it's a very prototypical kind of hair metal riffs and vibes, but
a very catchy chorus.
Yes, it's super catchy. It's super catchy. I thought Yankee Rose was pretty good. Elephant Gun with that bass solo kicked it up a few notches for me. As far as
is that your top 3?
No, sorry. Okay, so top 3 would be Shy Boy, Yankee Rose, and actually That's Life. That was in my top 3. Because I mean, it's a cool song. They didn't write it, obviously. Yeah, obviously they didn't write it, but I like the song, so there you go. And the only reason that one's in the top 3 is because I feel like the rest of the album is pretty mid to bad. I think Ladies Night in Buffalo is the worst song on the album. It kind of exemplifies what we were talking about before this, and maybe we'll go into it later.
Second worst.
Really? What's wrong with you guys? That's a good song.
No, it's
not. It for me. And then they were kind of tied for last also, so it's going to be 4 total. But Going Crazy, Big Trouble, and Bump and Grind were also in my bottom. So.
Interesting. Jason, what you got?
Number 3 is let's see, Shy Boy. Number 2 is That's Life, and number 1 is Yankee Rose. We pretty much had the same there.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as skippers, it's 3 of them that are really just, in my opinion, just not good. I did not like I'm Easy. I'm not into swing. Now, maybe it would have been better watching the movie, wherever that fit in, because that's right there with a movie kind of vibe, I guess.
Yeah.
Ladies Night in Buffalo, not good. It's a great it would be a great closeout jam, like the song before the end, where you gotta drag it out like 5 minutes while you announce like everybody that's in the band, everybody you're about to sleep with. Don't forget about the guy in the back, the tech. You know what I mean? And then worst one was Big Trouble, which is unfortunate because I really like the bass line. I like the bass work that Sheehan did during that song. The song itself is just it's like again, maybe it plays better in a movie scenario where he's telling a story, but it was terrible.
Yeah, I'll go next here because mine is not different than the two of you. Uh, I have That's Life is number 3. It's just it's a whatever song. I wouldn't say I love the song, but it's number 3.
It's number 3. Somebody had to be number 3.
Yeah. And number 2, Yankee Rose. I think it's a legitimately good, hard rock song. Upbeat, fun. It's just what I expected from the record. And my number 1 is Shy Boy. Now, when I first listened to this record, and it goes 1-2 from Yankee Rose into Shy Boy, I was cautiously optimistic. I was like, oh, man, this might be a hidden gem. Let's go. And then the rest of the album happens. So let me get into it. I'm Easy comes on, and it's like a swing whatever track. And, I was just like, okay, maybe that was just a one-off or, whatever. I don't hate the song, but it's whatever. Then Ladies Night in Buffalo comes on, and it's terrible. That's not a good song. And then the couple forgettable tracks in Going Crazy and Tobacco Road. Elephant Gun is whatever. But then like Big Trouble and Bump and Grind are just awful songs. So it's like basically all of the middle of the record is just like, to me, just borderline unlistenable. Now, I'm going to say this. Peppered in all of those songs are moments where Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan are just going off.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it's not the worst ride of your life to just listen through to the record because it's like 31 minutes. But like songs as a whole it's not enjoyable. Like for me, like this as an album experience, this was not fun. Like to just sit here and focus and like ingest it into my body. Like, so that's where I'm at.
All right. Well, hey, I have like a totally different list from you guys. It seems honorable mention for me, Ladies Night in Buffalo. I think it's a good song. It's one of only 2 songs on this record that actually have dynamics, that actually have something more than like all gas, no brakes, fucking bullshit David Lee Roth nonstop, right? So I think that song has great moments, including some top flight Billy Sheehan and Steve Vai. Number 3 for me, Elephant Gun. The dude's singing about his dick. It's a funny song. I like it.
That was my number 4.
Yeah.
Am I the only one did that song sound like Hot for Teacher?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say it, but I have a note about that. That is the most Van Halen-like song on the album.
For sure. Yeah. Number 2 is everybody had on here, Shy Boy. Shy Boy's an absolute fucking jam. Number 1 for me, I don't get it. I don't understand what everybody's problem is here. Big Trouble by a mile, dude. Like, this is the best song on the record. It's an actual song. There are parts of this song. It goes to this, and then it goes here, and then it goes down here. There's actual moments in this song compared to the rest of these atrocities. Speaking of atrocities, I'm Easy might actually be the worst song ever written. It's possible. The problem is Megadeth wrote a song called Breadline a bunch of years ago that may be worse, but I would probably put this in the bottom 50 songs I've ever heard in my life. And then the other skipper I have is That's Life. Because this is not the life I want to live with that song.
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect bookend. I think that song's great for the closeout for this album.
I'm just glad,
especially as a movie soundtrack.
Dude, as a
Yeah,
movie
yeah.
soundtrack,
Look,
I'm super intrigued. Like
what this
I
movie
almost
was.
want to re-listen to this album knowing that, but
I
then
wonder if there's like a script on the internet somewhere.
I remember
Yeah.
that I have to listen to like 7 not good songs. So
Because
like,
I
Yeah.
wrote I wrote in this like for Tobacco Road, I wrote down it sounds like a song that you would hear in a local bar.
Oh, well, that's a
Like
cover
where
too.
well no I didn't know, but I'm just saying it sounded like if you were just at the local bar and there was a live local band there and they play this song and like everybody in the bar knows the words because they're drunk and they're singing to it. And it's just like that sounds exactly and I'm just curious
Like a
now.
scene in a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. One last positive thing about the record before we get into like issues. Hey man, look, the album understood what it was. It was 30 minutes, 10 tracks,
Yes.
30 minutes in and out, keeping it simple. That was at least a real big win for this record because this thing could have been real bad if it got up to like 45 minutes. That'd have been rough. So let's get into issues. I'll just throw my issue out here first. I just put on here just while the album represents some different musical styles, it feels very one note. It's just too much of just that David Lee Roth like style. It's too much. I mean, I get it. It's his record, right? So I mean, it is what it is. But it's too much of just that now style, nonstop.
yeah,
That was my biggest issue with the record.
my issue with this record is there's too much David Lee Roth on it. I think you nailed it, Josh. No, it's funny, Josh. Like you say that it's so weird how we interpret things differently. You say like this record is one note. I think it's all over the place in terms of musical style, and that's why I don't like it. It's not cohesive. It sounds, I mean, now it makes sense because it's a movie soundtrack. So, like, there's different moments in the movie and stuff. So, because this is not written like a regular studio album, like that most people would like, okay, we have an idea for a record, let's write songs about it. Like, this just seems like you hit shuffle on like David Lee Roth's catalog. You just hit shuffle. These are 10 songs that happen to exist. This is like a burned disc, like a burned CD of a random mix track for David Lee Roth stuff.
I think what and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but like to what you're saying is like every song, no matter what it does, boils down to one thing: David Lee Roth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead, John.
I don't think this is a good experience. Like, I don't think this is like a real album. Like, doesn't feel like a real album to me.
I mean, depending on how you look at it, you may
it's not.
consider it not to be.
Yeah. Maybe this isn't really their debut. It's just a couple of covers and EPs all thrown on.
I mean, there's only 6 tracks on here that's written by David Lee Roth of the 10.
Yeah, and everybody's favorite song on this record was written by Billy Sheehan, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's
everybody.
it's crazy.
Yeah. Jonah, you got any nitpicks or issues?
I mean, I kind of already peppered them in, but yeah, just from a songwriting perspective, everything was pretty unimaginative, or just not really great. The whole thing is just kind of very mid from a songwriting perspective, like the structure, the lyrics, whatever. It's pretty unoriginal, I guess. But if not for the instruments, it would be a lot worse. And I'm not going to hate on David Lee Roth as much as you guys are, because like I said, that's his vibe, that's his character. So I was expecting him going in, so I wasn't disappointed by how much he was there.
I mean, if you
it's either you like it or you don't, right?
I mean, look,
I think it's very clear on that point.
To be fair, you look at the album cover and you know exactly what you're going to get. I don't think anyone who bought this in '86. I mean, this album sold well. So I think this album is just very much a product of its time type of deal. And if it doesn't speak to you, like, I just think it just doesn't, it just doesn't translate as well to 2024, right? You kind of had to have lived it.
Yeah.
My biggest nitpick for this was really like, it was basically after the first time I went through it, and I kind of asked, I was like, "Are we sure this is on this list legitimately?" Because we've had this happen before, and that's my biggest nitpick is how in the fuck did this make a top 20? Uh, and so my question to the group is,
I went back and read a lot of reviews, man. I mean, this album was very highly
yeah,
reviewed. Very.
Yeah,
so,
I can
so,
see it being
so
very, very popular when it came out.
yeah,
Yeah.
and my question is because we're looking at this fucking 40 years later. Uh, my question to the group was, is this album maybe overrated simply because of David Lee Roth, given he's just coming off the successful stint? Because when he leaves Van Halen, they're like at the zenith. They're
Yeah,
like
that's the. I
Icarus.
mean, he left them at the height of their popularity.
Yeah, like that's right as the wax is melting off of Icarus's wings. Like that's what he's coming off of. Like I'm just curious, is this album overrated based on his success with Van Halen? If this album comes out 10 years later after he leaves
Or even
Van
5 years,
Halen,
I'd say.
yeah,
Well, I mean, at that point,
and
the
you get
music industry is in a completely different place, and
well, you
like,
get a couple of these big Van Halen albums, with Hagar, just to kind of separate themselves. I'm just curious, like, is this album overrated simply because of his success with Van Halen?
I think
I
it's. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say yes is the short answer. And I think you can see that. I mean, he's got 6 records that have come out. He's sold over 4 million records of those 6, and this record by itself sold over 2 million of those records. So I think it was pretty clear, like as it went along, he stopped even having gold selling records, right?
Yeah.
So I think yes. I mean, like I think he did he or his manager or the producer of the record or whatever you want to say. I think they did a masterful job of trying to find a band to put behind them. We've talked about that ad nauseum already, but like that's the only thing I think that makes this record even close to being what it is. And to David Lee Roth's credit, he plays with a ton of great guitarists throughout all of his albums. He has John Five on a couple of his albums later on down the line, where he wrote a bunch of songs for him as well. So, like, he's surrounding himself with the right people. But yeah, purely this is just. I think David Lee Roth could have taken a shit on this record, and it would have sold at least 1 million copies based off of how popular Van Halen was.
He rode that
like,
wave, man.
I mean, look,
Yeah.
good on him for capitalizing on that, right? Like, get your money, right? Like,
Yeah.
Get paid.
All right. Well, hey, let's get into the last part here. This is where we give our scores for the record. Hey, just to kind of give you guys some awareness here. Here on Metalhead's Journey, for us, an average score is a 5. So I know if you look at a lot of scores out there, some people may give 7 as their average score. For us, it's a 5. And so the way it kind of works is anything that's 5 and above is varying levels of we would recommend that album to you. And especially if we get into the 9 to 10 range, that's like top tier, one of the best records of all time. Anything 4.9 and below is various levels of we would not recommend that. And then definitely if we get into the 1 level, that's just absolute dog shit. So I'll go first on my score here. For me, like, I struggled with this a little bit, right? Because I think I don't personally like the record a lot, right? Like, I think there's a lot of really good moments on it, but I also just don't think it's for me. Like, I'm just not in to this particular style when it comes to this album in a lot of cases. And so I think there's part of me that feels like it's just maybe I don't understand it. And I can't shit on it because musically it's fantastic. Like the quality of playing on here is top flight. And I think there are certain people I would recommend this to, or there are certain situations I would recommend this album for. So I'm going to put this just barely as a recommend. I'm going to come in as a 5.2.
I'll come in here. There are individual songs on this record that I've mentioned that I think are good songs. But as I've stated, I think ultimately what I figured out through talking with you guys and kind of discussing this whole thing is as an album listening experience, which is typically how I listen to records. I jam an album more or less from start to finish. You know, I don't do a lot of shuffling or like from playlists and stuff. So for me, I think that's where it's hard for me to recommend this record because I don't think it makes for a good album listening experience. So that being said, I kind of agree with Josh. It's not really for me either. So I'm not going to go too hard on it. I'm going to come in at a 4.8, just under a recommend. For me, it's just not really my thing, and I didn't enjoy my experience too much.
Jonah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. Despite a lot of criticism I had towards it, I actually did enjoy the overall experience more or less, based purely off of the highlights. Like I think the highlights from Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan really outshone some of the lowlights that were bothering me that I had, problems with. But again, I had pretty low expectations going in, so that might be affecting my score. But I actually gave it a 6.2.
Wow.
Nice. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to bring up the end here. This was a tough album to score. I didn't have any expectations. All I had was some hope. I was going to enjoy it because I hadn't really listened to any of this in album form before, and the way I give my scores is I rank every song. I give every song an individual score, and then I just tally up the scores, divide by how many tracks you got. That gives me a number, and I come up with a number for us. Now, that number matches Josh's as a 5.2, but
Smart man.
I can't recommend this album. I just can't. As a hair metal genre, and that's what this is number 20 of. Like if I knew somebody that was like into hair metal, like this would not even make the top 100 that I would give them to listen to.
And I think that's a fair assessment because still, even coming off of this, I still don't think this is hair metal. I still think this is just like rock or hard rock, right? Or somewhere in that genre.
I think hard rock is like a stretch. There's a few songs that are hard rock, but
yeah. I would say like this is a hard rock album.
Sounds like a movie soundtrack.
A few outlier songs that were mixed in and that were just kind of like, hey man, why don't we try something different? So going with that, saying that I cannot recommend, I gave this a 4.9, right up to the brink.
All right. Well, thanks to Jonah's score being a little generous. This does ultimately come out as a recommend, just barely though, at a 5.28. For the record,
I got that right.
For the record, that is on the lower end of our scores historically from the albums that we've reviewed, but ultimately still a recommend. It's considered a C tier, which I think is a fair point. Ultimately, not for us, but you could enjoy it. There's something to get out of it.
In my opinion, I think it's worth listening to at least once, just so you can hear what Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan do on the album.
It's completely fair.
But after that, if you never listen to it again, which I personally don't intend to, then you're not really missing out.
Yeah. So
that's unfortunate.
Also, if you guys don't intend to listen to us again, then go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe. We're putting out weekly metal content right now. Please come back and listen to us. We're putting out weekly metal content. We got metal reactions, metal reviews, metal brackets, all kinds of other cool shit. And hey, in the meantime, live long and prosper.
Take it easy, everybody.
Later.
Peace.